They thought they could bully me out of my grandfather's cabin with their fancy new HOA rules and threats of fines. What they didn't know was that I owned the land beneath their only parking lot and 75% of their precious lake. Now it's time for some justice. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more HOA stories. I never wanted trouble with anyone. All I wanted was to live peacefully in my grandfather's old cabin by the lake. But some people just can't leave well enough alone. It all started 3 months ago when I received the first letter from the Pine Lake Homeowners Association. The fancy letterhead and official-looking stamp made me laugh at first. I'd been living in my cabin for 5 years since my grandfather passed away and left it to me. There had never been an HOA before. Dear property owner, the letter began. It has come to our attention that your cabin, Lot 17, is not in compliance with the newly established Pine Lake HOA standards. Violations include unapproved exterior paint color, lack of proper landscaping, and presence of unauthorized structures, wooden dock. The letter went on to say I had 30 days to fix these violations, or face daily fines of $100. It was signed by Karen Wilkins, HOA president. I crumpled up the letter and threw it in my wood stove. My grandfather had built this cabin with his own hands in 1968. The dock was even older, built by my great-grandfather. No way was some random group going to tell me what to do with my property. 2 weeks later there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find a short man with slicked back hair wearing a polo shirt tucked into khaki shorts. He had the same smug expression as a mall security guard who takes his job too seriously. Mr. Thompson? I'm Richard Davis, Vice President of the Pine Lake HOA. We sent you a letter about some violations that need to be addressed. I got your letter, I said. And I'm not interested. Richard's face tightened. I don't think you understand. The HOA regulations are legally binding. All property owners in Pine Lake must comply. Since when? I've owned this cabin for 5 years. My grandfather owned it for 50 years before that. There's never been an HOA here. The association was formed 6 months ago. The majority of homeowners voted to establish it. Nobody asked me to vote on anything. Richard shifted uncomfortably. Well, notices were sent out. If you didn't receive one, that's unfortunate, but the vote was still valid. And now the rules apply to everyone. I leaned against my doorframe. This cabin has been blue since 1972. The dock has been here since the 1950s. I'm not changing anything. Then you'll be fined, Richard said, his voice rising slightly. And continued non-compliance could result in liens against your property. I shut the door in his face. The next day, I decided to visit the county records office. Something about this HOA didn't feel right. Why would they suddenly form one after all these years? And who were all these people? Most of the cabins around the lake had been owned by the same families for generations. The clerk at the county office was helpful, pulling up records of property sales around Pine Lake for the past few years. What I found was interesting. In the last year, a company called Lakeview Developments had bought up 6 properties on the north shore of the lake. All from elderly owners who had probably been offered good money to sell. Further digging revealed that Lakeview Developments was owned by a larger company called Summit Holdings. And guess who was on the board of Summit Holdings? None other than Richard Davis, my uninvited visitor. I went home and did more research online. Summit Holdings had a pattern of buying properties in scenic areas, establishing HOAs with strict rules, forcing out longtime owners who couldn't or wouldn't comply, then building luxury homes or condos. They were essentially using the HOA as a weapon to take over communities. The next day, I received another letter, this one stating that due to my ongoing violations, I would need to attend a hearing with the HOA board. The hearing was scheduled for next Tuesday at 7 p.m. in the community center, a building I didn't even know existed. I decided to go, not to comply but to see exactly who I was dealing with. Tuesday evening, I drove around until I found the community center, which turned out to be a renovated cabin at the north end of the lake. It was painted an ugly beige color that I assumed met the HOA's approved color scheme. Inside, 5 people sat at a long table facing rows of chairs. Only 3 other residents were present. I recognized Richard Davis sitting next to a stern-looking woman who I guessed was Karen Wilkins, the president who had signed my warning letter. Mr. Thompson, Karen said as I walked in. Thank you for coming. Please have a seat. I remained standing. I'm only here to understand why a group of strangers thinks they can tell me what to do with my property. Karen's fake smile didn't waver. We're hardly strangers. We're your neighbors and fellow homeowners who care about maintaining property values and the aesthetic appeal of Pine Lake. Most of you don't even live here full-time, I replied. And I know about Summit Holdings. That got a reaction. Richard's eyes widened slightly, and he exchanged a quick glance with Karen. I don't know what you're talking about, Karen said. Now we're here to discuss your violations and… No, I interrupted. We're not. I'm not changing my cabin, I'm not paying your fines, and I'm not joining your HOA. You don't have a choice, Richard snapped. Your property is within the HOA's jurisdiction. If you don't comply, we'll place liens on your property. Eventually we could force a sale. I laughed. Good luck with that. As I turned to leave, Karen called out, One more thing, Mr. Thompson. Your dock. It extends into the lake, which is not your property. We've filed a complaint with the county to have it removed. That stopped me. They were right about one thing, I didn't own the whole lake. But they didn't know what I did own. You see, my grandfather wasn't just a simple man who built a cabin by the lake. He was smart. Very smart. When he first bought the land in 1968, he actually purchased more than just the lot where the cabin sits. Much more. The next morning, I paid another visit to the county records office. I needed copies of all my grandfather's property deeds and surveys. What I found confirmed what I remembered from conversations with him years ago. My property included not just Lot 17 where my cabin stood, but also a strange L-shaped parcel that wrapped around the north and east shores of the lake. It included a 20-foot strip of land that surrounded about 60% of the lake, the entire east side beach area, and, most importantly, a 2-acre parcel that now served as the main parking area for all the North Shore properties, including the 6 owned by Lakeview Developments. Even better, the deed included water rights to 75% of the lake itself. My grandfather had purchased these odd parcels from the original farm owner who sold off the land around the lake, keeping these sections because they were considered less valuable for building at the time. Armed with official copies of the deeds and property surveys, I spent the next week meeting with a lawyer. It cost me $2,000, but by the end I had a solid understanding of my rights and a plan. 2 weeks after the HOA hearing, I put my plan into action. First, I had a land surveyor come out to officially mark the boundaries of all my properties. Then early on a Saturday morning I got to work. With the help of a few friends, I installed a chain-link fence around the parking lot property. We put up private property and no trespassing signs every 20 feet. At the entrance to the parking lot, we built a gate with a card reader. By noon we were done. It didn't take long for the phones to start ringing. First it was Richard shouting about illegal fencing and blocking access. I calmly explained that I was simply securing my private property as was my right. When he threatened to call the police, I invited him to do so. My lawyer had assured me I was within my rights. Next came Karen, switching between threats and attempts to reason with me. I let her talk, then simply said, I'm not interested in compromising. The parking lot is mine. If you want to discuss usage fees, my lawyer will be happy to draft an agreement. By mid-afternoon, a crowd had gathered at the fence. Residents couldn't get to their cars. The 6 new owners from the development company were the angriest, as they had guests over for the weekend who now couldn't leave. When the sheriff finally showed up, I was ready with copies of the deeds and property surveys. After reviewing them, he turned to the crowd. Folks, I've looked at the documentation. This is private property belonging to Mr. Thompson. He has the right to secure it as he sees fit. But what about easements? Karen shouted. There must be easements for access. There are no recorded easements on this property, the sheriff replied. If you believe otherwise, you'll need to take it up in civil court. As the sheriff left, I addressed the crowd. I'm willing to grant temporary access so you can remove your vehicles. After that, if you want to use my parking lot, we can discuss reasonable terms. Over the next few days, I met with a steady stream of angry cabin owners. But without parking, their properties were much less valuable, some practically inaccessible. This was especially true for the new development properties, which had been built with minimal on-site parking based on the assumption that the large lot would always be available. A week later, I received a call from a lawyer representing Summit Holdings. They wanted to meet. The meeting took place at my lawyer's office in town. Richard and Karen were there, along with a slick corporate attorney named James Wilson. Let's cut to the chase, Wilson said after minimal pleasantries. Your actions are causing significant hardship and financial damage to multiple property owners. That's unfortunate, I replied. But I'm just exercising my property rights, something your clients seem very concerned about when it comes to the color of my cabin. We're prepared to offer you $50,000 for the parking lot property, Wilson said. That's well above market value. I laughed. Not interested. $100,000 then, he countered quickly. I leaned forward. Let me be clear. I'm not selling. But I am willing to grant an easement for all property owners to use the parking lot, under certain conditions. They exchanged glances. What conditions? Karen asked suspiciously. First, the HOA is dissolved immediately. Second, all property owners get a written guarantee that no new HOA will be formed for at least 50 years. Third, Lakeview Developments agrees to sell their properties only to individual owners, not to other development companies. And fourth, you pay for removing that chain-link fence and installing something more attractive. I'm thinking a nice wooden fence with a management office where residents can get their access cards. Wilson scoffed. That's absurd. Summit Holdings has plans for. I don't care about Summit's plans, I interrupted. Those are my terms. Oh, and I almost forgot the most important part. You'll need to pay an annual fee for lake usage rights. Lake usage? Richard sputtered. What are you talking about? I pulled out another document. My grandfather owned water rights to 75% of the lake. Says so right here. Anyone who wants to swim, boat, or fish in my part of the lake will need to purchase an annual permit. The room went silent. They hadn't known about the lake rights. This meeting is over, Wilson finally said, standing up. We'll see you in court. My lawyer smiled calmly. We look forward to it. The legal battle lasted 4 months. Summit Holdings tried everything, claiming historical easements, arguing public access rights, even attempting to have the county condemn my property through eminent domain. But my grandfather's paperwork was solid and my lawyer was better than theirs. In the end they settled. The HOA was dissolved. Summit Holdings sold their properties to individual buyers at a significant loss. And I now collect a reasonable annual fee for parking and lake access that covers maintenance costs plus a nice profit. I use some of that money to repaint my cabin, the exact same shade of blue it's always been. My dock still stands where my great-grandfather built it. And every morning I sit on it with a cup of coffee, enjoying the peace and quiet of a lake without an HOA. The best part? Karen and Richard both sold their cabins and moved away. Last I heard, they bought condos in a community with a very strict HOA. I'm sure they're much happier there. Sometimes I think about what my grandfather would say if he could see how things turned out. He wasn't a vindictive man, but he was big on standing your ground and not letting bullies push you around. I think he'd be proud that his foresight ended up saving not just our cabin, but the whole character of Pine Lake. As for me, I learned an important lesson. Before you try to force someone off their land, make sure you know exactly what land they own.